Hello and welcome back to another episode of Nick Tiffany's Movie Reviews, coming at you online and in print format at nicktiffany.com, in audio format wherever you get your podcasts, and even in video on YouTube. Today we are back with more of the 2024 Seattle International Film Festival coverage with another exciting interview for the film Resonator. This is a documentary feature directed by Alison Tavel, and it's about her father, Don, who in the late 70s created a synthesizer that he called the Resynator. And some 25 years after his passing, Alison digs this up, having never known her father. He'd passed right after she was born. She finds the synthesizer and begins to learn about the man behind the machine. She goes and talks to some of his friends, different musicians, and people who were a part of bringing this technology and music fusion to life. It is an exploration of family, sometimes the secrecy that drives us to want to know more, because it's absolutely human to want to know where you come from and who or what you're a product of. It was just such a great exploration of that. It won the Narrative Audience Feature Award at South by Southwest for documentary feature. I had a great conversation with Alison Tavel. I'm just super excited to continue to share awesome coverage with you guys. This has been so much fun at this festival, from talking with so many great filmmakers to being able to engage with so many great fans of film. It's just been awesome. So thank you as always for listening, and please enjoy the interview.
That work for you? Okay, there we go.
Perfect. There we
Cool.
go. All right. Well, Allison, thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Nick Tiffany. I write and record movie reviews, interviews, different things like that for my own publication, NT Movie Reviews. It is such a joy to have you here. Alison Tavel, the director of Resonator, one of the writers of the film as well. Uh, just a quick segue as I fumble around with Zoom technology. Something that was immediately impressive to me just about this film, as you dug up this old synthesizer that belonged to your dad, was immersing yourself in so much, dare I say, archaic technology that is just so vastly different from anything that we use for music production, for even doing this Zoom here. What was it like working with so many analog devices? And did you have some prior experience? I know you've done a lot of music coordination and different tasks kind of in the music and TV world. What was there anything daunting about this experience for you, or were you kind of versed in some of it to begin with, or?
I mean, you would think, first of all, thank you. It's really nice to hear you say such nice things about the film, and I'm really happy to be doing this. I'm super excited to be in Seattle too. But yeah, no, it was to work with that kind of gear, even though I spent my whole adult life, even like my teenage years, like immersed in music and musical jobs. I'm not a musician, and I was part of Grace's crew, but it's not like I was, tuning guitars, or I was, bringing in road cases and stuff. Like, I was her assistant, her tour manager. So I didn't have any background in synthesizers or that kind of, analog circuitry or soldering or any of that stuff. And in the film, like the first scene where I'm having to like deal with that was with Mike Beagle, the engineer, and I'm tripping over my words, and I don't know the difference between software and hardware. And, like it was really hard and really overwhelming, because I'm sitting there talking to somebody who isn't just knowledgeable about that world. He invented that world, like he's comes from Neutron, that's like the beginning of all of this stuff. And um, so overwhelming and so stressful. And because you're dealing with analog circuitry, and digital software from 40 years ago,
Sure.
it's always going to be quirky, and you never know what to expect. So it's it's fun now because I'm 10 years into it and I'm like used to it, but doing those demos early on with all of those musicians who I really respect and like gave me all of their time and patience to do this project, to help me with this project. If the resonator was like glitching, or if it, God forbid, didn't turn on when I, pushed it on, like you just never know what's going to happen when you turn it on. If it turns on, if it decides to track, if it decides not to track, if, you turn the filter down and that just like cuts the volume all the way off, like for some reason, and it never done that before. Like there's just so many things that can go wrong and did go wrong and do go wrong, that it
Sure.
was um, it was a constant source of stress for me.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Did you find in yeah, I just the story itself I think is just fascinating. This idea of not knowing your father necessarily, you have all these ideas of who he's been built up to be, who he is. He's a genius. He is a pioneer in this industry. And something that really resonated with me was just this idea that families, whether it's parents or grandparents, I felt like every year after I turned 20, or maybe after I was out of high school, every year there was something new I would learn about our family history, or there was something new I would discover about my own parents that totally shatters part of your beliefs or your world, or it makes you really curious to understand more. I think where your kind of connection came into it, and what I appreciated about how you were sort of asking questions, looking to discover, was I want to know what made him human. I want to know some of those flaws. I get that there is this protective bubble that our parents or grandparents might want to put us around, but I think sometimes weirdly it ends up having the opposite effect because we put these people on this impossible platter, on this mountain that it feels like, well, as the product of this person, and it's something I think people do naturally is we just compare ourselves. What are people my age doing now? At 25, he was building a synthesizer. Like, I don't, at 25, I was working in a restaurant doing whatever, it's totally different. But when you learn these little nuggets, when you learn, okay, they kind of struggled like I did. They also had similar thoughts, that feeling debilitated in this world that I had, or maybe not being loved like how they wanted. When you sort of started peeling back this layer, was it overwhelming for you at all as you were telling this story, just in terms of trying to make sense of what's real in your life and what you've been led to believe was real?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of nailed it perfectly. Everything that you said, I'm like, yeah, you got it. And I think a lot of people feel that way. Like I in the film, he's an animated superhero. He's the Resonator. And
I
that's
love
because
that.
like, yeah, as kids, we see our parents as they're our superheroes, right? Like they're perfect. And then when you become their age or close to their age, or you become an adult, you're like, oh, they're also just they're just like me. They're they're normal. Like they're not these perfect people. I mean, you go through that in like your teenage years where they're the worst,
Sure.
right?
Sure. Then you're like, they're actually kind of cool later on.
Yeah. Then you just become an adult and you realize how hard it is to be a parent. I mean, I'm not a parent, thank God, but like
Sure.
my friends who are parents, I'm like, oh yeah, it's not, we take our parents for granted for sure. It's not easy to do. Um, so yeah, I just think that it was so overwhelming for me to learn all of that information as an adult. That was not the best things to hear always, right? Like
Hmm.
there were some dark things that were said about him and I learned some things that he was struggling with, but because I was an adult receiving this information, I could understand it better than if I'd learned about his darkness, as a 10-year-old. So like while I
Sure.
was kind of frustrated at first with his family for not as a kid not being more real with me, I get it. I would probably have done the same thing. The cool thing that I found was that my mom did the same. She never, revealed any of this stuff. But as an adult, when I asked her about it, she was like, okay, yeah. And she told me everything. Whereas like my grandma wouldn't give it up. She said, yes, and I won't tell you. And I
Sure.
I just could
I,
never understand that.
I know that feel with the grandparents.
Yeah, and that's her generation too. Like everything is about the facade of things. Everything has to look perfect, whether it is or not. And what you learn in life, at least what I've learned in everyone I've ever met, the more perfect someone appears to be, the more they're struggling with inside. So I get it, and I'm not judging her. I mean, she died, and she died with stories that I'm sure I would have loved to hear, but
Sure.
um, it's just not, it is just it is what it
It
is
is
kind
what it is. It's interesting. I like that you brought your mom up in this idea of her just being able to be open and vulnerable, which even for our parents' generation is still something I
of.
think that they're working on, as you've got us who are maybe in that almost 30-ish range and lower, trying to chip away at them a little bit. Um, One thing that really impressed me though was just how much your father's friends and family were willing to be vulnerable as much as it might have been tough to bring up. But your mother, especially, there was a moment when she's sharing that letter with you that he had written to his parents. And you also learned some things from your mom that you probably didn't know about that either. And I wanted to know, on top of seeing your dad in all these different lights, was there appreciation that you also gained for your mom, though, as well, because of everything, not only that she provided for you, but looking at some of those fears that maybe your dad had about he was raised in the kind of love maybe he didn't receive, and then seeing how your mom took that for you and your sister. When you learned all of that, what I know it's a project about your father, but I feel like it's hard not to get so involved and grow deeper with all of the different subjects in the film as well.
Well, thanks for bringing it up because that is like, I've spent 10 years telling a story about my dad. But it's so much about my mom, like it really is like we've always had a good relationship. It's been from day one. Like a big reason why I never cared to learn about my dad growing up was because I had a mom and a dad in my mom. Like she just raised she just made that this is life. And I do all the things. And um, we've always been close. And like even my sister, she's technically my half sister, but like I never knew that and I never cared. And it's because she's never been my half sister. She is my whole sister, and it's just
Absolutely.
the way that my mom kind of created this world for us. So it was I think that this film actually brought her a lot of closure because she'd been holding on to those things. And, I think that it was like a release for her too. And she came to I premiered it at South by Southwest in March, and she was at the premiere. And the moderator said something similar than that you said. He called out my mom or she called out my mom and said, can we talk about how brave your mom is? And I was like, yes, and she's here. And I got to tell everybody in the audience, like, what a hero I think she is to me. So that was like maybe one of my favorite moments at South by because I have the courage to be able to do this. And the idea that like I made a film, the reason why I was able to finish this film is because I know that I could have stopped making this film. I could have quit 5 years ago and never finished it. And guess what? She doesn't care. She's going to love me no matter what. And so like I think because I had the support system like that growing up, I'll try anything. Like I've gotten so many no's with this project, turned down by so many musicians, so many managers, so many sales agents, distributors. Like, I've gotten a lot of rejection in 10 years. And it doesn't stop me from continuing on because I'm down to try it. I don't care. I don't need anyone else's approval. Like I've got a strong family, and that's I think what keeps me grounded and able to move forward because I know no matter what, I'm loved and I'm supported. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So I was so happy that she was at the premiere, and she'd seen some cuts and stuff before that. But yeah, it's a lot of unspoken themes about my mom too.
Sure. Sure. Well, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And congratulations again on your trip there at South by Southwest. It's always such a fun festival, and I'm just so glad people are as responsive to this as I'm feeling. There was a really brilliant moment that I loved when you were out in the jungle. I mean, you've just spent hours, probably the whole day, making incredible music with everything from the sounds your mouth can make and spending time with people enjoying not just the synthesizer itself, not just the resonator, but music. And something or a theme that I picked up on or felt that spoke to me in this was, even though maybe your father wasn't able to share verbally or out loud some of those things that a lot of people I think struggle with, just as far as whether it's advocating for yourself, whether it's asking for love, whether it's asking for help, we speak through different methods. And the synthesizer was almost his connection to the world. And I love that idea of, even if it's just you here, you're programming something to share. This music is a shared experience. So watching you guys out there in the jungle, sharing in this music, and you made a comment sitting out looking over a picturesque view that for the first time after that day and out in nature, you really feel that presence of your father there. And I just thought that was so beautiful. And I was wondering if there was ever a moment during your filming where you were surprised by something you learned about him that you really had a great interest in. Obviously, his ties to music and things you can root perhaps for yourself, but was there something that as you were uncovering more, you're like, wait a minute, he's also into this like I am, or what? I never knew that.
That's a good question. I've thought about it before too. Something I realized later on, there's two things. One that's not in the film, which is um a friend of his told me about this, like he was really into hot sauce and like stuffed a bunch of chilies in his mouth at a restaurant, like took bets on like how many hot chilies he could eat. I'm like, oh, that's definitely something I would do. And then the thing that is in the film that I realized is I'm such a I mean, the whole film, you can tell, like, obviously I wear my heart on my sleeve and I'm very open to talk to people, but like I write letters and notes to people who I care about. Uh, I try to do it a lot. It's not something that I actively think about, like, oh, I should write them a letter. I just like, whether it's an email or a text message or a typed up note or something, like I'm a letter writer. And I realized, I watched the film and I was like, oh, so is my dad. Like, I mean, my mom, everybody like writes notes and stuff, but like the
Sure.
way that my dad like was so emotional in his letter writing and stuff, I was like, oh, I think that's where I get that. Like we process our emotions and we tell people how we feel through these written kind of emotional journeys that are typed and stuff. And that was pretty cool to me. And that was another kind of a reason why when I started all of this and got the resonator out of the attic, I started writing letters to him, just as kind of like a therapy method, and also just to kind of remember, because I knew I was going to be filming it, I wanted to remember what I was feeling in the moment. So I'd be like,
Sure.
"Dear Don, today I got your resonator out of the attic. It was really hard." And so later when I was thinking about doing voiceover, how I was going to approach voiceover, I was like, well, he wrote these letters to me and I kind of wrote these letters to him. And instead of like talking to an audience, like I made this film for me and I made this film for him. So I should be talking to him, not to the audience. And so I
Sure.
started like thinking about it in more of like a letter, kind of like as if I was writing him a letter.
Sure.
Um, because I felt like we had that in common.
That's awesome. I really appreciate that. And I feel like I'm always someone as well. If there's ever been something really difficult, it is easier to put it in a letter, whether it's I can accurately describe exactly how I'm feeling, because
Yeah.
in person it is so hard. Even as an actor or doing things, you can memorize a script, but to have those words hold weight and to really have that meaning, I think you give someone the time to process it as well. When you can read
Yeah.
it on your own, you have an ability to not react instantly when they're there in front of you or something. And so I think it really helps inform kind of the whole picture, and it really gives you that time and space to digest it,
It's
think about
true.
it, and move forward.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not just for you writing it, but you're totally right for the person receiving it too, to be able to like read it and digest it and process it the way in their own time. It's way more powerful, I think. And obviously like having a conversation one-on-one is can be intimate and powerful too, but yeah, I'm a letter writer
that's
for
well,
that
it's like,
reason.
you reading just some of the words that your father had written about you, and just seeing those on the screen and going through that. It just, as eloquent as I think people like to think that they can be and how they speak, the summation of that is just otherworldly, that someone could encapsulate everything like that so well,
Well,
and
it
have
is.
it
It's
be
like
so
a time
moving.
capsule, right? Like I got to used to collect vinyl. I mean, I still kind of do, but I was in place in the Midwest and I grabbed a vinyl and I pulled out this letter that I guess like this couple were long distance and they were writing letters and one of the one of the letters that was stuffed in the vinyl was they were talking about like what they were doing that day and they were watching a football game and they were talking about the game in real time. And it was just so cool. It really was a time capsule and you just got a sense of being in that moment with them and it was so cool.
That's super cool. Um, Something that, as you perhaps find closure for yourself, as you mentioned, maybe your mom found closure for this. Something that also really affected me in watching this, that I imagine was tough for them at first, speaking to friends of your father's and coworkers of your father's, who some of them also maybe were a little cloudy around the details of his passing, or just knew different sides of him that maybe caused for them to be a little bit more concerned. In bringing all of these things up, I know it can be difficult, but I watched the movie, and as much as I saw how it helped you, how it helped your mother, I really think it had a pretty profound effect on his friends as well. And one of the gentlemen had mentioned it, seeing that smile, it's, a crazy kind of comparison, because it can also, I can understand that feeling of, oh, I see him in you, and that could make me sad. But I think through what you've done, you've brought so much joy back to his memory, and you've brought this joy back for the work that he was creating. And and I think, was there ever a time maybe that you felt that even though I should be learning things from them, and maybe as the older adults, they're here to comfort me, did you ever find that it was the opposite way around sometimes, and that you maybe found yourself kind of consoling them, or perhaps helping them process this somewhat as well?
I do. It feels weird to say that. Like, I don't want to take credit for like,
Totally. Not in a selfless like, oh, I came in and
yeah,
I therapized
that's what
it,
I
and I did
did.
God's work and whatever.
Um, I do I feel like this project has helped a lot of people. Like Mike Beagle, for instance, my dad's engineer and partner, he wrote me an email after I went down and dropped off the Resonator and I left it with him and then I headed back to tour. He wrote me an email that night saying that he just felt like when he opened up the lid of the Resonator and he looked and he saw his work from like 35 years ago, he felt this like rush of adrenaline and like happiness and like he was just so like he was just like catapulted back to that time and he was so proud of the work that he and my dad had done together. And I think bringing up these stories and stuff are good for that, were good for my a lot of my dad's friends and they've been so excited to like share these stories after all these years, I think, with me. But a lot of the, not a lot, three who I can think of, I've connected with maybe like 20 of Don's friends, like just random, you know, people who reach out to me, who said they knew my dad and they're sharing stories. And I've Zoomed with a couple of them. I've had phone calls with a couple of them, and three of them who I can remember, um, they all talked about some rocky relationships with their own kids and how they're trying to figure out how to get back in touch with them. And I've had a couple of guys start getting emotional. And I think that that's like one of the goals I had of this, project was I want people to look at their own lives and see what they've kept from their kids or what the kids have kept from them or how, how they grew up and how the way that they grew up might be affecting how they're raising their kids or, that's one of the reasons why I decided to put myself through all of this and continue filming when it got really personal is because I was like, well, if I'm struggling with this, I know my dad's not, the only person who was of his generation who was dealing with these mental health issues.
Sure.
And, my grandma's generation, especially being the way they are and not revealing anything and not being willing to reveal anything, that's got to be so hard on my dad's generation. And look at what my dad was trying to do. Like he was writing these letters, he was in marriage counseling, like he was trying to figure it out. Um, and who knows, maybe it got the best of him. I think it ended up being carelessness. Like I don't necessarily think he killed himself, but it's important to talk about those things because maybe somebody would watch the film and have a conversation that they wouldn't normally have had with their kid or the kid with their parent or whatever.
Absolutely. That watching that is, it's something that immediately jumps out at me. I think it gives you some of that pause in terms of reevaluating your own experience, whether it's me with my parents, my grandparents, thinking of potentially even estranged family members, or there's so many of those dynamics that you kind of touched on in this film as well, where an accident happens, tragedy happens, and families sort of fracture. And then there's really this air of confusion and just not understanding why we don't speak and why we're not together anymore.
Yeah.
Um, for you, when
Families are
you
all crazy,
oh,
everybody has family, so everybody's, you can relate to something in this film because it's just a portrait of a real life family,
That absolutely, and I think it's why this film is so important though too, is because it is everything that a family and people should be trying to do and should be more okay with doing. Just these idea, not everything is going to be comfortable. Family is complex. It's messy sometimes, but if everything really is rooted in love, then we should be able to share the good, bad, and otherwise, even if it maybe holds up a mirror that's a little too familiar sometimes. That's that's also never a bad thing. I've always felt that movies that make you uncomfortable or movies that unsettle you in that sense, it's not a bad thing. It's like having those conversations. You need to lean into it because I think it maybe is telling you something or it's revealing something about yourself. And it's the coolest part about these film festivals, especially documentary filmmaking as well. I think the power of what you can inspire in people and open up or help kind of guide them in the right direction. It's really awesome. You've done a really fantastic job with this film,
Well,
and
thank you.
this is
I mean,
as your first.
we're not
Sorry.
perfect, right? Like nobody's perfect, and that's like part of the the main reason why I decided to put in, there's a couple things in the film that like I don't look so good, right? Like I don't know what I'm talking about when I'm sitting with Mike Beagle talking about like technology and stuff, and I'm so overwhelmed and you can just see it. Or like when I'm in Colombia and I'm like, I don't know how to speak Spanish and I'm like trying to work it out with the driver, like there's just like those moments where I was just like, I don't look so good, but like it's so real. And like in order
It
for
just
me
is.
to be relatable, I have to show the kind of awkwardness that is me, you
Sure.
know?
It's
Yeah.
better than watching some facade that we try to put on because we want to appear likable or because I'd hate to look like I don't know this here. I just, there is something that's where I feel like that authenticity is where people connect. And that's where this stands apart from something that does feel fictitious or it does feel a little unbelievable because, like you said, it's too perfect or, oh, there's no way she knows all of these different knobs and bells and whistles. And if she did, awesome. But the fact that you don't pretend to know everything about this, I think that's something I find in documentary filmmaking where sometimes people can kind of talk down to you, perhaps, or pretend like, it's or maybe the Alex Trebek effect of, well, actually, this was the answer. I knew this all along, even though I didn't until they revealed it to me.
Right.
But I think that does make a big difference. And I know we've only got a couple more minutes here. I just wanted to ask you as we kind of wrap up, at times, much like almost as life is very cyclical, you kind of hit a snag right before you were supposed to reveal the resonator. Almost kind of like your dad had all those years ago. I can only imagine, especially working with technology. I mean, it's frustrating, especially when it's like it's go time. We need to be out here doing this. Everything is built for this or led up to this. That can totally rock you. What in your father's story, whether it was, kind of picking up where maybe he felt like he couldn't continue with it anymore after taking it over to London and feeling like, okay, it didn't work there. I think this is it for me with my project. This is as far as I go. Did you have that same kind of feeling? And how did you work through that? And push to get it working to figure out it was the Napoleon Dynamite crystals that were causing the issue in there.
That's awesome. Um, yeah, I had the like I really was it was 2017 NAMM show and I was sick and it was raining and the resonator stopped working the night before and I'd already paid for a film crew. Like I
Oh,
put it I'm self-funding this whole thing, for 10 years. So I'm not gonna just cancel on them. Like I'd already committed them and we got the badges and everything. So I was like, well, why don't we just like go get some B-roll? And I actually had the thought of like, let's just pretend like everything's fine. But I can't do that. I couldn't fake it. I was so sad. So we just filmed it and I didn't know if it was even going to fit in the story because that wasn't the story again I was trying to tell. And so and also like it wouldn't have mattered if the demo had even gone over well because nobody came. Like it was so busy and it was so loud and I didn't really promote it that well and so it was just the whole thing was a failure, right? And Um, and I did. Like I called my mom and she wasn't worried at all. She was like, "Well, you know, obviously you're going to get it working again." And
Hmm.
because she knew me, she knew I wouldn't just stop. And again, like she was like, you know, you've already done so much. Look what this project's already done for you. Like your dad would be so proud. And like she told me she loved me and I was like, "Oh yeah." So I like sat and was frustrated for like a couple of days. And then I started working with all these you know, engineers and technicians around town. I only filmed a few of them because in the very, very beginning, I really was like, I don't know what to do. And
Sure.
I'm not going to pay for a film crew. So like the Ed Miller, who's not credited, he's in that like resurrection montage.
Hmm.
That's just iPhone footage because I was like, well, I guess I'll just document this, but I don't, you know, I'm not paying for anything right now.
Sure. Sure.
Um, and it took over, I think over like 9 or 10 months to figure it out. And then, yeah, it turned out to be
Wow.
a dead crystal that was throwing off the grounding frequency, throwing off the frequency to the whole board. And then of course, like Richard in the moment, he says, you know, just if it stops tracking pitch, just power it off and power it on.
I love that. I was like, oh, that's it. That's
That's it.
why didn't she try that at the expo? You know?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I just,
That
you know, I got a little frustrated and then I just kept on going. And what I've learned is you just have to be patient and know, you know, in 10 years, the most magical things have happened, and most of them haven't happened like that.
sure.
Most of them happened over a period of a long, long time. So, yeah.
That well, I guess we do have a little bit of extra time. I spoke prematurely there. I
No,
apologize.
it's fine. I see the like clock.
See,
It's
this
like,
is this is I'm so new to Zoom. I am the technologically inept right now. This it feels weird being on the other side of this. But that's something that you've kind of been speaking to. So this was a 10-year project that, at least for me, when did you start rolling the footage for this? Because were you working on it for years, kind of in the background leading up to this? Or I know that you've been on tour and doing other things. How did you divide your time kind of working across this project, and when did it really start kind of becoming like, okay, I'm putting most of my time into this for this year or this grouping of time or
I didn't really have the thought. I started in 2014. I got the resonator out of the attic, coincidentally on Father's Day, which was not planned. But I just
life
filmed.
just works out that way sometimes, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And I was on tour, working for Grace Potter. And so basically I would look at her tour and be like, well, who do I want to see? You know, Mike Beagle lives in California near me. So I took the resonator down to him. Brian Key, who's in LA, so I was able to meet with him. But like Gordon Baird lives in Massachusetts. So I just waited until Grace had a music festival in Vermont. And I was like, cool, I'll fly to Massachusetts a couple days early, film with him, rent a car, drive up, meet the tour there. So and like my dad's twin, RJ, once I got connected with him, I figured out where he lived and I just looked up the tour and I was like, okay, we're going to be here. So I'll meet him here. So I just planned my shooting schedule around the tour because it was like a free way to get to these places rather than having to pay for it myself.
Totally.
I still spent a
I'm
crap
sure
load
you
of
spell. I'm sure you spent a pretty penny on that as well.
but yeah, so a lot of the filming was just like, well, who do I want to know? Who do I want to get information from? Like my dad's friends or whatever, Emmett Chapman and Gordon Baird, Mike Beagle. And then when do I end up there on tour? Because ultimately we tour all over the place. So that was kind of the beginning of all of it. And then yeah, later in 2018, I had to stop touring because I had filmed the bulk of everything and I needed to work with an editor and I needed to figure it out. So I still did some filming in 2019. That's like when I read the letter that because my grandma died in 2018 and then in 2019 that's when his letter got sent to me by my aunt.
Okay.
So yes, there were things that happened after 2018, but I stopped touring in 2018 to be able to be in LA and work just on the film and I had a day job. But
Okay. That's
yeah.
really impressive. That I think it's something that in conventional, say, narrative filmmaking, feature filmmaking, you think, okay, we're going to shoot for 3 to 6 months, however long it is, and then someone's going to go edit it, and then eventually this will happen. And documentary filmmaking is just so vastly different from that. And so I'm glad I clarified because watching this, I think you do such a good job moving through the story so well that it seems like, oh, this was a no-brainer for a project, and it's put together so well that you wouldn't assume that, oh my God, this was a labor of almost 10 years, and me having to drive to Podunk, Iowa here and going to wherever on the
Yeah.
little trip. And so that I think it just really speaks words to not only the passion that you bring to the project, but just how important it was, because that definitely translates in not the urgency of the story that's being told, but the connection I feel like the audience forms to it almost immediately, is
Thank
just
you. That's
due in
very nice.
part to that. No, absolutely. I was curious. This is more kind of like a fun one. In
Nick,
the
I'm just gonna jump in. The video is actually gonna cut out in 2 minutes.
Okay.
Did you want to do a wrap segment? I just want you to have what you need. We can also jump on the link.
Yeah, no, this we could probably
Okay.
sum this up in 2 minutes here. I was just gonna ask if there was a brief, just kind of fun memory that you learned about your dad, whether it was through through his friends or through coworkers, and something that just like either caught you off guard or just really just tickled you because it was like, oh my God, like that was my dad, I guess, huh?
There's one that comes to mind. A friend of his, this guy Jim, told me a story of he was in class one day and he had to do a report on the Sistine Chapel, and he started drawing the ceiling on the chalkboard with all these different chalk colors, and got so into it that the teacher had to stop him and be like, "You have to present now. Like you're running out of time." And he was just really into the drawing part of it, and he didn't want to present. And I just think that
This is the presentation. What do you mean?
totally.
This is
Yeah. Well, this has been so fun. Thank you so much for asking such great in-depth questions and for enjoying the film. It makes me so happy.
Thank you so much for taking the time and just for being so open and receptive to the questions. It makes it feel far less, I think for me it's always a good sign when these feel more like conversations than just so Alison, please tell me in your own words.
Totally.
Well, congratulations again on just a phenomenal film. I cannot wait to share this interview, share my thoughts on the film, and just keep spreading the good word about Resonator, because this is just such a unique perspective and look into the life of your father. And I think we're all better for you sharing that. So thank you so much again.
I really appreciate it. So nice to meet you.
You as well. Thank you.